These chairs, those ones right there. I don't know if they have air energy at all. It's kind of wild. Hey, how's it going? That's good. Well, that's what case.
Subcommittee will come to order. Apologize for my delinquency. I had to come from the Capitol, had another hearing, and so I apologize for keeping you waiting. Good morning. I want to welcome all of you to today's hearing. This morning, our hearing is to review the Food and Drug Administration's FY21 budget request. Our witness is the Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, Dr. Stephen Hahn. Welcome, Commissioner. This is your first appearance before this subcommittee, so we'd like to take the opportunity to very cordially welcome you. You come to the agency with an impressive set of scientific and leadership qualifications, and your leadership will be needed definitely to navigate the vast and ever-changing issues under the FDA's jurisdiction. I want to take the opportunity to highlight an issue that is on the minds of many, many Americans right now: coronavirus, COVID-19. FDA plays a vital role in ensuring the safety and the efficacy of any vaccines, therapeutics, or drugs that are designed to address the coronavirus. It also monitors our medical product supply to identify and to mitigate any shortages that may result from the disruptions the coronavirus has already caused on the global marketplace. These are issues that we continue to monitor very closely, and we're committed to making sure that the FDA has the authority and the funding that it needs to continue its role. We hope the recently enacted Supplemental Appropriations Bill will assist the FDA in carrying out its vital job during this crisis. But I do want to note the observation of a leading expert on public health. When asked what went wrong with how the federal government handled this crisis, he replied, "What went right?" I'll have further questions on the administration's handling of the coronavirus outbreak, but I should also note that we continue to actively monitor your efforts related to youth use of vaping products. The deadline for companies to submit pre-market application is just 2 months away. Preserving the ability of adults to use vaping devices as an off-ramp from smoking while preventing bad actors and youth-appealing flavors from remaining on the market is a delicate balancing act, and we look forward to hearing more about how you intend to accomplish this while upholding FDA's mission. I want to thank you for being with us today, and I look forward to today's discussion. Before we move on, I certainly want to note that our distinguished ranking member, Mr. Fortenberry, is unable to join us this morning, and at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Adderholt, who's the former chairman of this subcommittee, for opening remarks. Mr. Adderholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. And good morning, Commissioner Hahn. Good to have you here. And as mentioned, of course, this is your first appearance for the Appropriations Committee, so welcome especially to that. And we have enjoyed over the years working with your predecessors, and so we look forward to working with you as well. And congratulations on your new job. I know just in December you were sworn in, so still somewhat new to the job, but I know that you have hit the ground running because you've had no choice with the environment that we're in today. Under different circumstances, we'd probably ask a lot of questions about the FY2021 President's budget. But I suspect, as already been mentioned, a lot of our discussion today is going to center around the public threat that we're seeing with the coronavirus. I plan to focus my attention on a couple of key priorities. One of the issues of how the coronavirus outbreak in China and across the globe has forced us to, as a nation, to examine our critical medical supply chain and the vulnerabilities of our drug and device sourcing overseas. This increased attention to our supply chain elevates another related and much ignored problem of how FDA treats these drug and device producers overseas as versus the production of facilities in the United States. Secondly, I'd like to briefly explore what options you think are available to increase competition of generic drugs to make medications more affordable to the people faced with daunting health care costs. When the Health and Human Services Deputy Inspector General appeared before this subcommittee less than 2 weeks ago, she reminded the members here on this dais that over 80% of active drug ingredients and 40% of finished drugs on the U.S. American market, from ibuprofen to reduce fevers to antibiotics to treat your infection, are produced outside of the United States. These troubling dynamics take on special urgency given the spread of the coronavirus. The FDA has identified at least 20 drugs that exclusively source active pharmaceutical ingredients or finished products from China. FDA also issued an alert that at least one Chinese drug maker has ceased production of a human drug due to the coronavirus infection at a manufacturing site. And I think it's important that we reduce this national vulnerability and that Congress act to make production of critical drugs and other medical supplies on U.S. soil more attractive. One such option involving FDA is a switch to advanced manufacturing. As I noted earlier, there is inherent unfairness in how FDA's foreign and domestic inspections are carried out. This could be another reason why production has moved off our shores. According to the Health and Human Services Inspector General, FDA inspectors routinely conduct surprise inspections in the U.S. to ensure that drug companies are producing medicine in a safe, clean, and responsible manner. However, when it comes to foreign inspections, FDA customarily gives companies advance notice, often as much as 12 weeks, that enables the drug suppliers plenty of time to clean up their act. This is counterproductive and creates an unlevel playing field for companies trying to manufacture drugs here in the United States. This is a real problem if our drugs are sourced from over 150 countries, including China and India. Now, moving on to the threat of moving on to the issue of generic drugs. One of your predecessors noted that one of the greatest contributions that FDA can make to the cost of medicine is to increase competition with generic drug availability. One such challenge appears to involve the Orphan drug review process. As I understand it, the law allows FDA to grant 7 years of market exclusivity to a drug manufacturer if the drug is intended to treat a disease affecting less than 200,000 patients. Or such exclusivity is granted if the manufacturer cannot expect to recover the cost of the drug development and marketing. While the ultimate policy goal is to incentivize drug development needed by many Americans with rare disease, the Act may be used to block competition. Our constituents struggle with the high cost of health care, and if this is an area where Congress can help, FDA needs to work with us to fix it as soon as possible. And so I would appreciate your input today as we move forward through this hearing. In closing, thank you to not only to you but your dedicated staff for their work around the clock, doing their part as we work forward and move forward with this coronavirus outbreak that's affecting not only the United States but around the world. And thank you. Now yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Adderholt. At this time, Mr. Hahn, you can proceed with your opening statement. We will take the entire statement for the record. You may summarize if you like, or you may take the full time.
Yep. Chairman Bishop, Congressman Adderholt, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the President's fiscal year 2021 budget request for FDA. As a cancer physician, researcher, and leader of complex medical organizations, I have personally relied on and trusted the FDA throughout my own career. It is my sincere privilege and the honor of a lifetime to serve as Commissioner of Food and Drugs. As the gold standard for protecting health, the FDA is trusted by Americans and admired around the world for its work ensuring the safety, efficacy, and security of our nation's medical products and the safety of our food supply. Behind me are the agency's center directors and other agency senior leaders. They represent the more than 17,000 FDA employees who serve the American public. I have been overwhelmed by the professionalism, commitment to public service, and remarkable expertise of FDA employees. I am humbled to be working alongside them, and they work every day to improve the lives of Americans. I'd also like to note that in addition to their day jobs, they are part of the all-of-government response to the COVID-19 outbreak. Please join me in thanking them for their service to our country. There are three discrete areas I'd like the agency to focus on during my tenure as commissioner. The first is unleashing the power of data. The agency has lots of data. Just think about the massive amounts of data that we obtain and create with the thousands of drugs and devices that we review each year. How can we, the FDA, harness the power of these data to help, where appropriate, make us more nimble and better informed regulator? Utilizing data in a smarter, more modern way can allow us to improve our regulatory decision-making. The second area we'd like to focus on is more outward-facing, and that is empowering American patients and consumers. FDA has done terrific work incorporating a patient and consumer-focused approach. We want to continue building on this progress, empowering the American public to be even more informed about the products we regulate. In addition, we want to increase our efforts to give consumers the background knowledge and key information they want across all of our regulated products. And the third area we will focus on is innovation, choice, and competition. We are operating in a time of unsurpassed scientific and technological innovation, and I am proud of the work that FDA has done in promoting such innovation. In terms of choice and competition, as Congressman Adderholt mentioned, take, for example, our work on generics. 90% of the drugs dispensed in this country are generics. In the previous 3 fiscal years, we've seen record number of generic approvals. 900 in both fiscal years 2017 and 2018, and over 1,100 in fiscal year 2019. We know that more generics on the market means more competition in the marketplace. A recent report found that a 39% reduction in average manufacturer price occurred when a single generic was added to the market, and that up to a 95% reduction in price was seen with 6 or more competitors. We also have data to show that for the period of January of 2018 through July of 2018, this saved the American consumer $26 billion. We want to make this progress in other spaces as well, including biologics, and we know we can. We look forward to further advancing scientific and medical progress of this country while maintaining FDA's gold standard of safety and effectiveness. I would be remiss if I did not mention our efforts in the COVID-19 outbreak. This is the most recent example, in my opinion, of how FDA adapts and responds to emerging public health issues. At present, this virus continues to spread and has reached several parts of the globe. As of yesterday, CDC reported 647 cases in the U.S., although we have heard reports in the news that that has increased, and CDC will update its data at noon today. FDA is playing an essential role, Chairman, as you mentioned, working closely with our public health partners. We are helping our partners to conduct more widespread testing for the virus by issuing emergency use authorizations. And we are also issuing guidance that allows for laboratories to develop, validate, and immediately use newly developed tests to achieve more rapid testing in the U.S. We are also working very close with partners to assist in the development of treatments, vaccines, and other diagnostics for the virus, as well as surveilling the medical supply chain for potential shortages and disruptions. This is the work of our agency at its finest. As the outbreak evolves, we will be sure to update the subcommittee on our work. I would like to close by thanking the subcommittee for your continued support of the agency. We all very much appreciate that, including the investments you just provided FDA in the recently passed supplemental bill. As you all know, FDA plays a vital role in protecting and promoting the public health, and this subcommittee's continued interest and support allows us to fulfill our mission. Once again, thank you for inviting me. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hahn. Let me begin the questions. The U.S. has lagged behind many other nations in its ability to test patients for coronavirus. Administration officials, including you, have made a series of what have appeared to be confusing and inaccurate predictions over the last few weeks about how many tests would be available and when they would be available. People are frightened. They're not being well served by this lack of accurate information. Let me run through a series of questions with you. Did HHS or the White House decide to use CDC tests and to limit them to being used in only 12 labs? If so, why?
No, sir, they did not.
Okay. Why did FDA wait a month after the public health emergency was declared and 17 days after problems with the CD test were revealed before allowing the use of tests that were developed by non-CDC labs?
Sir, I can go through that if you want.
Yes, sir.
Okay. At the beginning of the outbreak, and that was in January, sir, prior to any U.S. cases, FDA reached out to developers who we work with regularly, and in the context of past public health emergencies, as we've done in the past, to encourage the development of tests and what we could do to actually facilitate development. In January, we began collaboration with not only CDC, but manufacturers around the development of a diagnostic test. And as you probably know, sir, on February 4th, we approved the emergency use authorization for CDC. We have, since that time, worked with over 100 developers on the development of diagnostic tests using a template we provided. And I just want to quote a developer who was quoted in the trade press just recently about this, commenting on FDA. They've done all the work. They've even given us a cover letter that they want and said, cut and paste it on your letterhead. They could not have made it any easier. And this is quoted in the press. We are now currently engaged with over 50 developers, and we have been over the entire month of February, on what we call pre-EUAs, which is really helping them back and forth on the development of their tests. We review their data as it is generated, and we provide feedback to help them develop those tests, sir.
Okay, now that the FDA is allowing these other labs to develop and use their own COVID-19 tests, do you have an oversight process in place to ensure that the tests are working properly, both prior to FDA's review of the lab's own validations and long-term? And if so, what is that oversight process?
Sir, thank you very much for that question, because I think that's an important point for the American people. Throughout the response, and frankly, even before this with the development of diagnostic tests, our role is to provide the scientific rigor around these tests. And I'm going to approach this like a doctor, like I am. If I have a patient in front of me who's come to see me with a question about if they have coronavirus, what I want to know is when I take that test for that patient, the information that I give to them is reliable. And in particular, what I want to say is if the test comes back negative, I have to be sure it's negative, because I know that patient is going to go home and hug grandma. And we want to make sure that they're truly negative. This gets to one issue of tests, which is sensitivity, to make sure there's no false negatives. And one of the things we've done throughout this with all of our developers, including CDC, is actually pay a lot of attention to the science behind this. Sir, you are completely accurate about mentioning that we've recently loosened somewhat our regulatory approach to this to allow individual labs, and most of them are academic lab centers, develop their own tests. These are CLIA-certified labs, so they can perform high-complexity tests. What we've told them is, you develop the lab, you do the validation that you've always done, and we know you do well. You have 15 days to come back and give us that information so that we can do an independent scientific check. But in the meantime, you can begin testing patients.
Okay, do you have an estimate for how many tests will ultimately be needed, and how do you plan to hit that number?
Thank you, sir, again for that clarification. CDC would be best to ask regarding the number of tests that will be needed, but I'm very happy to take that to Dr. Redfield and get back to you, sir. But just to give you an accurate number of where we are right now on tests, which is very similar to what we announced at the press conference on Saturday from the White House. All public health labs in this country have tests. Now, there's some confusion, and we tried to clarify this on Saturday, so I just want to be clear. I'm talking about individual tests, not test kits. Now, we send out test kits, or the companies do, and they contain the capacity to do the tests. So what I'm describing, sir, is the number of tests that would be available. There are approximately 200,000 tests that have been sent out to the public health labs. CDC is responsible for this and has been in constant contact with them, and particularly in the areas of Washington, California, and New York, providing additional tests as needed. There are two companies, BioSearch and IDT, who have manufactured the CDC test and are presenting those or selling those around the world. Most of those, sir, are going to non-public health labs. As of this weekend, Saturday, 1.1 million tests were distributed, and we now have 2.486, so close to 2.5 million tests in the system. Now, with current testing procedure,
several hearings at the same time.
Yes, ma'am. So with that 2.486 million tests, the estimate is that over 989,000 patients can be tested with the current testing approach. Dr. Redfield has announced that they are looking at a different approach that would allow just one swab and one test per patient as opposed to two, which should increase the number of patients who can be tested with what's in the system right now. And then the final point, sir, I'd just like to make is we have been in touch every day with manufacturers, both about the tests as well as all the reagents that are needed for the tests, with the manufacturers, and there are two of them, who are currently producing and sending out the tests for the CDC tests. They tell us that they should have 4 million additional tests out in the system this week. They continue to tell us the same thing. We will update you if there's any change to that. And, sir, just one last thing. We have been in constant touch, and on our website, we have frequently asked questions about these tests. We're updating it daily as we get feedback from lab developers. And today, we're going to establish a 1-800 line so that for 24/7, we'll man it. Anybody can come to us and ask us a question about the development of tests and any reagent shortage they might be seeing.
I apologize for going over my time, but I thought that the information that you were giving was very important and critical, and so I extended my time, and I apologize to my colleagues for that. But at this time, without objection, I would like to recognize the gentlelady from New York, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, out of order to make sure that she's able to ask some questions before she has to go to other hearings that are ongoing. And, of course, if she would like to make an opening statement, we will certainly entertain that.
You are very generous. I appreciate it, and I'm sorry that I missed your statement, but I think I will go to a question.
Good.
Regarding testing and automated approval. In my home county of Westchester, New York, as you probably know, 108 cases of coronavirus have been confirmed over the past week, of 173 statewide. The New York National Guard has been called in to distribute food and sanitize public places within a 1-mile radius where the virus is most dense. New York is taking aggressive steps to combat the virus by increasing testing capacity and has asked the federal government for approval to use additional labs, including at qualified hospitals, state facilities, and private labs to process tests as quickly as possible. Things have calmed down a little bit, but I won't repeat a lot of the questions and criticism that the federal government has gotten from New York because they organized quickly, immediately. So the first question I'm asked, when will FDA approve all of the requests of New York State for approval of additional laboratories? And specifically, when will FDA approve automated testing at all requested sites, which could result in much more rapid testing? So I apologize if I missed your discussion of testing. Did I? But if you could just answer me.
Yes, ma'am.
And you'll bear with me if he's already answered it. Yes.
Congressman, I did not answer specifically the New York question. I'm very happy to do that. I received permission early this morning, approximately 6 a.m., from Dr. Zucker from the New York State Lab to comment about our conversations. We have had extensive discussions daily, several times a day, about the needs of New York State and are providing maximum flexibility for their laboratories. As you know, the Wadsworth State Lab has done a terrific job. They were the second emergency use authorization that we issued after the CDC, and they've done a terrific job of developing a test. As they have explored the areas where they want to expand, we have provided them with the appropriate regulatory flexibility. I understand that we'll have a call today with Dr. Taylor and our folks here to provide what you're requesting. We just need to understand the full scope of what they want. They have done the validation testing, and what I did mention, Congressman, which is really important, as a doctor, I want to make sure that the test is valid and that the right information is in the hands of the public health officials and doctors, so that if you tell someone they have a negative test, it's a real negative test, and they don't go home, hug grandmom, grandfather, et cetera, and potentially spread disease. So that is so important. And the New York State labs have done a terrific job. It's hard work, and it takes a lot of effort and scientific expertise. We are working hand in glove with them. We should have an answer today on that, Congresswoman.
Have you had problems, by the way, in other states of inaccurate testing, shortened periods of time, lengthened periods of time, or is New York the only state that's doing its own testing?
I'm not aware of any inaccuracy in testing. Most of the other states, ma'am, are using the CDC test and the kits that are distributed by the CDC through this company, IDT. However, we are aware that, and this is one of the things that, potentially CDC and Congress could work on. The platforms that are used are varied across the country. There are a number of different commercial platforms. On our website, and what will be available on the 1-800 number I'm describing will be all of the flexibility we've given around those platforms, because it can't just be one platform. We need to use the entire installed base of the country to be able to run these tests. However, Congresswoman, what's important is that as we expand to different platforms and different extraction techniques, so you take the sample and you do the extraction to put it in the test, we need to make sure that there's still validity of the tests, because what we don't want are inaccurate results for the American people. That would make the situation much worse.
Thank you. Now, if I can get to my favorite issue, the looming deadline of May 12th, 2020, for e-cigarette manufacturers to submit their products for review. I'm worried about enforcement and transparency. FDA likely has already received, or soon will, thousands of pre-market tobacco product applications. And after May 12th, those products that have not submitted an application should be promptly removed. If FDA does not publicly list the products that applied, how can state and federal enforcement agencies know whether a product can legally remain for sale? For example, how can we know if Puff Bar puts in an application for mango but not Cool Mint?
Congressman Lowy, as you probably know, we have to protect confidential commercial information. Applications that we receive, as you completely say, by the May 12th, 2020 deadline, it will be our responsibility to enforce if we do not receive an application for a covered product, and we will do so.
Wait a minute. These products are being sold to the market, to the public. They're not doing this in secret. The public should know which products are complying and which are not.
Congresswoman, I can get all of the information around what we'll do when that deadline comes in. I can tell you that that deadline hasn't slipped. We will be receiving applications. For those who have not submitted application, that will become part of our enforcement against those products that aren't a part of the application process.
Let's discuss Puff Bar for a minute and disposable e-cigs. I was optimistic when President Trump said he would clear the market of flavored e-cigarettes. In the end, he listened to his political advisors instead of public health experts and announced a loophole-filled proposal that left thousands of kid-friendly flavors on the market and allowed disposable e-cigarettes to flourish. Now young people are purchasing cheap, easily concealable disposables. Are you cracking down on flavored disposable e-cigarettes? And most of these products, and Puff Bar's disposable in particular, are new. They've come on the market after August 2016. Why hasn't the FDA taken them off the market? I must tell you, I found out about e-cigarettes about 5 years ago from kids in elementary schools, with 60% in elementary schools and junior high. What are we doing? Why are these still on the market? Now, I know you're new to the FDA, and I had many discussions with your previous person, but I don't understand what's going on. You know, originally here, and I've been in this Congress a long time, the FDA wasn't allowing products on the market until they were reviewing them. In any event, can you answer that question?
Yes, Congresswoman. If it's okay with you, I'd like to go through exactly the questions that you asked.
It's okay with my chairman, but I think this is an issue that has been challenged for a long time by many of my colleagues because we're seeing it in their districts as well as mine. Thank you.
Congresswoman, thank you.
The chair defers to the chairwoman.
Oh, you're very kind. But I think, I really see the urgency here, and I think you've been chair of this committee a long time. Products shouldn't be going on the market until they were approved by FDA. Something's backward around here. They're on the market. We have to fight to you to review them. But in any event, let me defer to you because of the generosity of the chair.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and I did enjoy our conversation about this. Maybe not enjoy, but it was a very fruitful conversation, I thought. Actually, I did enjoy it. Just to preface this, the agency takes this issue very, very, very seriously. I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, and I'm a lung cancer doctor. I have seen the ravages of tobacco, and I've sat across from patients who have suffered from that. What I don't want to see are more youth addicted to nicotine and the potential for them to go on to combustible tobacco products. This is a significant and very, very high priority for the agency, and I want you to know that. Director Zeller's behind me. We have a very close relationship. There's not a day that goes by that we don't discuss something related to this subject. What I can tell you is that we use data from the 2019 Monitoring the Future study to inform the guidance policy, but it has three prongs. The first is, as you mentioned, the flavors that are most appealing to kids in the cartridge-based ENDS products. But the second and the third prong are around any product that has, and I can give you the exact wording here, any ENDS manufacturers that's not taking the appropriate precautions that we find to protect youth are part of our enforcement guidance. So the products you described, if we find that in fact they're being marketed to kids, or in our active daily monitoring we see those trends, we will act appropriately. And anyone, not just kid attractive, but anyone that's marketed, any of these products that's marketed to minors will fall into the same category. We are likewise concerned about alternative sources for kids, such as the disposables. And we are tracking that very closely, and Director Zeller and I promise to be aggressive in the enforcement associated with that.
Thank you. Now that we've solved the problem, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Mr. Aderholt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As FDA knows very well, the men and women of this nation have an expectation that the federal government will protect the health and well-being of its people. Your dedicated professionals there at FDA know this very well. However, our nation has an inherent vulnerability when drugs are sourced from over 150 countries, including China and India, as I mentioned in my opening remarks. Let me throw out a basic question to you. Do you believe that our drug supply is safe?
Congressman, I want to assure you, this subcommittee, and the American people that we do, in fact, believe that the American drug supply is safe and secure. I do agree with you, sir, that we need to look at the issues of redundancy of manufacturing, where the sources of active pharmaceutical ingredients are, as well as final drug form. This is an issue of utmost importance, and I think it's been highlighted by what we found in the coronavirus outbreak, in that we have certain authorities around the medical product supply chain that we can use. With drugs, drug manufacturers are required to tell us if there's a shortage that they're aware of. What we don't have is full and robust information about the supply chain, and this, of course, what comes to the fore with something like coronavirus. We have a number of legislative proposals we put forward, both in the drug, device, and animal drug sphere, that we think will give us additional information to help keep an accurate track of the supply chain. Congressman, the other thing that I think is really important is what you alluded to, and that is a longer-term solution is advanced manufacturing. This is certainly a drug supply and a medical product on the prescription drug side, but also on the device side as well. I think we have to do whatever we can to stimulate advanced manufacturing in pharmaceuticals and also to encourage domestic production. I think that will give us the appropriate redundancy and allow us for essential medications and vaccines in particular to ramp up when we need to.
And that leads me to my next question. In this latest budget supplemental, we fought for and were successful in providing you with roughly $20 million for advanced manufacturing activities. And of course, that would need ways for drug and vaccine manufacturers to help entice drug companies to bring production back to the United States. The $20 million supplemental was in addition to the $38.5 million that Congress provided in the FY2019 budget. What is FDA currently doing to entice drug and medical device companies to reestablish their manufacturing base here in the United States?
Thank you, Congressman. Really important question, and one of utmost importance, particularly in this time of the coronavirus outbreak. And thank Congress very much for the support that you've given us over the years for it. It's been very, very helpful. We are providing technical assistance and technical guidance to manufacturers. As you know, we have oversight over the manufacturing of drugs as well as biologics and devices. And if we can shift to an advanced or even continuous manufacturing approach, we want to be able to provide guidance about what that oversight would look like so that there's some regulatory certainty for pharmaceutical companies. And we obviously see this even more and more from the coronavirus, but what we need to do and what the goal of the advanced manufacturing is to improve the agility, flexibility, and redundancy, and to have more information about the supply chain. We want to make sure that we do everything we can to bolster this drug supply to support U.S. and obviously international demand. A couple of things, sir, that we have done with the money that's been appropriated, $38.5 million so far. We've established 2 new programs to advance the science of technologies around influenza preparedness. So obviously that's a really important issue, particularly in light of what we're seeing now with coronavirus. And we've issued a draft guidance to give regulatory clarity, which we're receiving comments on continuous manufacturing for prescription drugs. Just 2 examples of what we've done with the money so far. In terms of the supplemental funding, thank you very much, sir, for that funding and for all of Congress. It's extremely helpful. We're currently working through the specifics on our end, but we intend for this to be an all-of-agency approach, since it's not just prescription drugs, but devices, animal drugs, as well as biologics. And we are intending to pull together a completely collaborative approach on this and build on what we've already done.
My time's about out, so I'll wait till the next round.
Ms. Pingree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for being here with us today and for the work you're doing, particularly during this challenging time. I know a lot of people at the FDA must be working a lot of hours, and we greatly appreciate that. It was interesting to read the story that I think was in the New York Times today or yesterday, which kind of led us through some of the processes that maybe haven't gone right, and particularly some of the challenges in Washington State with who's able to do the testing and did we have information before they were technically able to release it. And I think it's just yet another reminder of all the things that we've been learning about what doesn't go right and what is good in our system. So without looking back at that and second-guessing all that at this moment in time where we really have to think about, are we on track? And you gave us a lot of very good answers about that. I did have a chance to talk with our own health department in Maine and our director of CDC in Maine. And we are very fortunate because at this point we are still one of the states that has not had a positive test. But we all know the importance of being prepared and having the capacity to deal with it when we do. One of the things that he mentioned to me is that we still need to expand the availability of testing to non-government labs, like those in hospital systems. What do we need to do to get them online more quickly?
Thank you.
And I totally understand as well. I wanted to say I appreciate your focus on the importance of accuracy and not having negative tests. But one thing that's clear is we don't want to have too many hurdles in the way of getting this capacity out there.
Yes, ma'am, and it is completely a balance because you're right, we want to have a good test, but on the other hand, we can't throw up roadblocks to getting those tests to the American people. Completely agree. That is exactly where the agency is. So as you know, we recently issued some guidance, EUA guidance, for flexibility around laboratory-developed tests. Now, who are those people who would do that? They could be a hospital system. They could be an academic center. In fact, most of the ones, and there's 18 of them now around the country who've done this, what we've told them is if you're a CLIA, and CLIA is a certification process through CMS laboratory that does high complexity testing, if you're that laboratory, we know you're a great laboratory, you can go ahead and develop the test. Here are some recipes, here are the reagents, here's the information about those tests. You can develop that test. We call it an LDT, laboratory developed test. You can do the validation because you know how to do that. Once you're sure and confident of the validation, you get started with that test testing. You can do that. Now, we're requiring them to just let us know that they've started so that we can keep track of who's doing this. And then within 15 days, they come back and give us the validation information. We're doing the check of that. And that, I think, answers the other question that was brought up. How can we ensure that there's scientific validity there? We are very confident of these labs. They're terrific labs around the country. But everybody needs a second check, and we're prepared to do that.
So I apologize for my ignorance on this, but are the in-hospital systems that I was being asked about, are they already CLIA, or is that part of the problem that they have to be certified?
Well, I can't speak to the specific labs, but many large hospitals, certainly the academic labs, are CLIA certified labs.
We don't have academic hospitals in Maine, just our big not-for-profit systems.
It could be very well that they are. Our team is very open. I mean, I've told you we can
We'll follow
contact each
up,
other.
yeah.
We can
Yeah.
definitely follow
Okay.
up on it.
Secondly, how do we ensure that those labs are sharing the results with state health departments? So as these things are growing, they have the information they need to do the work with the public and the preventative work.
Congresswoman, you are asking all the right questions here. The coronavirus task force that I'm a part of, the White House task force, we have been addressing this issue because what we do need is to develop, like with flu, a system where there is the ability to report that. CDC, and I believe Dr. Redfield spoke to that today, is working with the White House task force to actually develop that system. We have information now about public health laboratories because they do have the requirement to report to CDC, but a nationwide reporting system for coronavirus would help very much to address the issues that you've brought up.
So do you anticipate, and I can hear you saying maybe this isn't exactly in your domain, but that we will expand that requirement that other testing labs are reporting to state health departments so that they can track what's going on?
I can't speak for the CDC right now, and that would be a question that's best addressed to them, but ma'am, we can get back to you with the answer to that question.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm out of time, but I really appreciate your answers. Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. Mr. Mullinar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Hahn, thank you for being here with us today, and I want to thank you and then all the professionals at the FDA for their work, just ongoing work in protecting public health, but also especially during these trying times. So we appreciate that very much.
Thanks, sir.
I wanted to ask you, on March 9th, the FDA and FTC issued warning letters to 7 companies for selling fraudulent COVID-19 products. And my understanding is they were asked to respond to the letter to correct the violations. And what I'm wondering is, have they responded? And also, do you have the resources you need to identify and issue warnings to companies that may be making bogus claims, but also to take enforcement or legal action against these companies?
Thank you, Congressman, for asking that question. We're taking this extremely seriously, just like we do in all of the medical product space, but particularly during this time. I think you're highlighting a really important point, which is that we do not want false information about what works in this outbreak. We did announce that we issued these warning letters. I can get more information about the follow-up with those. I don't have that right now. But I can tell you that in all the spheres of medical products, we have a progressive approach, which includes some of the things that you've spoken about. Again, I can provide more information about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for doing that. I think that is important.
Yes, sir.
Also, I had received yesterday a letter responding to a letter that I and 56 colleagues had sent regarding the use of dairy terms in the labeling of non-dairy products. And I want to thank you for that response. We have a lot of dairy in my district, and the use of dairy terms on non-dairy products may cause consumers to mistakenly believe that these products have similar nutrient levels as real milk, which is not accurate. Can you provide us an update on the FDA's ongoing work to provide clarity between dairy and non-dairy products to ensure that consumers are not being misled?
Yes, sir. As I mentioned in my opening statement, one of our priorities for the upcoming year is in fact empowering the American consumer. And you're bringing up an excellent point, sir. We want the most accurate and up-to-date information in the hands of the American public. And I share your concern that the labeling of some plant-based dairy alternatives may lead consumers to believe that these products have the same key nutritional attributes as dairy products, even though these products can vary widely in their nutritional content. We've been working diligently. This is a fairly complicated issue, as you know, and we are evaluating and analyzing the full variety of those plant-based products to get the most up-to-date information into the hands of the American public. We're also aware, sir, of some challenges on the legal side for labeling restrictions, some challenges we've had under the First Amendment. We're working through those as well with the agency's lawyers. But we are working closely with industry on this. We want to hear from stakeholders, industry, also consumer groups, about what's the best information that we can get out. I want to emphasize also that we are a science and data-based organization, as you know, and we want the science and the data about nutritional facts labeling to be present on the labels for the American people.
Great, thank you. Also, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about when Congress passed the Drug Quality and Security Act, we recognized the need for the FDA and states to work together to ensure safely compounded medications. And the report language that we put in the, recognize the revisions made in the new MOU for human compacting released in September of 2018, encouraged the FDA to work with stakeholders. And I understand that the goal is to have states sign on, but about half of the states have said that at this point they haven't signed on or aren't willing to sign on. Can you elaborate on the status on this?
Yes, sir. This is a really important point because we're trying to balance certainly the safety of compounding. As you know, there have been some high-profile outbreaks that have occurred with respect to infections and compounding, but also with not making this overly burdensome on states. We have received a lot of feedback about this, and just to make it clear from the beginning, we want every state to sign this MOU. That would be really important because we want to have the cooperation and work very closely with the states. So we're working hard on the MOU. We're looking at revisions, and we hope to be having something out in the coming months. But again, just to state, we want as many states as possible to sign this memorandum of understanding. We also understand completely that access to compounded drugs is critical for some patients, and we don't want to deny that access to those patients. So finding the right balance between safety and getting those drugs in the hands of patients will be really important. It's one of the things that we're doing in this MOU. And if I have a moment, I can just tell you some of the things that are in the MOU that might help the states. We've increased the threshold for what's called inordinate amounts to 50% from 30%, which should help a lot in terms of advancing this. We've removed the burden on the states to need to take action when a compounder distributes more than that, and we've allowed them to just notify us so that we have that information rather than they're taking action. And we've also awarded a grant to the National Association Boards of Pharmacy to actually put together an information sharing system, which we think will really help the states move forward on this important subject.
Great. Well, thank you, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for that added extra time.
Mr. Pocan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Just want to say you do have big shoes to fill. I think Commissioner Gottlieb is someone we all had a great working relationship, as I know we will as well. I had great respect for him. Yesterday we had him come to the Progressive Caucus and present, and you don't have a whole lot of, honestly, Trump appointees, American Enterprise Institute employees come by to the Progressive Caucus, but he got it because we respect him so much. So I look forward to having that relationship. Help me to make sure I understand this. So you said 989,000 people can get tested with the tests that are out there right now, but as I understand it, the processing, we can only process about 16,000 a day right now. So at that rate, that would take 61.81 days. And if we get it up to 20,000 by the end of the week, what they're hoping for processing, that would still be 49.45 days. Is that math correct? Am I understanding that we only process that few, and that is the reality? You can have tests, but unless they're processed, they're nothing?
Congressman, I think you're heading down the right path in the way of thinking. It's complicated, as you know. There's the upfront processing of the sample where you extract out what you need to do the test, and then there's how you run the test and the process that you do. One of the things that we've done, and again, this is a dynamic process.
Just as quick as possible, because I have so many questions. I
Yeah,
apologize.
we're expanding the platforms, both on the
But where are we
extraction-
today? Are we at 16,000 that
I
can be
can get that
processed today?
information to you, sir.
But does that sound about right, 16,000 a
I
day?
can't speak to the absolute number.
Have
there,
you
sir.
seen Scott Gottlieb's?
I have.
'cause
I
he's
have
put it
a
out there.
huge amount of respect
So
for
do you
Dr.
think he's
Gottlieb.
close to right, or do you think he's way off?
I think that I would want to get you the most accurate information
Okay,
possible, sir.
and I think it's really important because it appears not truthful if we say there's 989,000 people that can get tested, but you can only process 16,000 a day. That's a real problem. We have to way ramp that up. So I heard you talking about how you're giving them information, you're having them let us know if they can ramp it up. We should be aggressively ramping this up. If his numbers are right, and I would bet, I'd save my hair if either one of us had it, that he's right, because he often is. That's a real problem, and I think we should be more honest that we can't process that many. So that number should be off the top of your tongue right now. I really believe if we're going to be honest with people, this is the problem that I keep hearing from people. They feel like they're not being told the total truth. And because of that, there's a lot of misinformation. So if that 16,000 number is way off, say that. But if it's pretty close to 16,000, we need to get that kind of information out as well.
Yes, sir.
So I really appreciate that, like, sooner rather than later, sort of, so we know where we're at on that, because, again, it's not fair to say there's 2.486 million tests that can cover 899,000 people, if indeed 16,000 a day. That's 2 months to process that. So I just think that's a really big asterisk, so big it barely fits in the room.
We'll get that information
Okay,
to you,
thank you.
Congressman.
Also, are we facing shortages of, and I got a few different areas. One, the reagents needed to run the coronavirus diagnostic test. Two, of the 3 drugs that people are being treated with the most, and I'm going to massacre the names, but ciprofloxacin, azithromycin, and piperacillin. And the final one is it true that we're rationing sedatives necessary for people on ventilation as a result of, for example, any serious respiratory illnesses, that those are being rationed right now too? So those, I guess, the questions of the reagents, those 3 drugs, and the sedatives.
Congressman, we're aware of pressure in the supply system on the reagents for these tests. And our medical device shortage group has been 24/7 working on this issue. We have a lot of frequently asked questions on our website. I mentioned earlier today.
If you can just answer those questions because
Yes,
of
sir.
my very, very
Okay.
limited time.
We're out there with the laboratories providing them alternatives for these reagents. When we become aware of shortages, we are going to let the American
So
people
what's
know.
the supply we have right now for reagents? We probably know that off the tip of your tongue.
So we know, we've been reaching folks. We know that there are pressures, particularly around
Is it
RNA.
a 2-week supply? That's about what's out there right now?
Again, we have to contact multiple.
We need those. I mean, honestly, no offense, those are not answers you're giving me. Like, those should be the tip of your tongue right now. We really need to know that. How about those drugs?
We're not aware of any shortages of those
Those
drugs, sir.
3? Okay,
Correct.
and then how about, we were told there's rationing of the sedatives for people on ventilation, and there's a real concern about that.
We're not aware of any.
I'm seeing nodding heads, though, behind you from your staff. Okay. Okay, thank you. But that's the kind of stuff that daily, I'm not happy CDC's, they were going to only update every 3 days. They took numbers off. They say they're going to put them back up, but their numbers are still way off. I just think this stuff is real important for us, too. In the 30 seconds I have left, I don't know if you can answer this about you. Who's distributing tests? Who's getting the tests out there? What agency?
Right now, to public or non-public health labs?
Public.
So the public, CDC is.
Okay. Do you know this? I was told a military base in Afghanistan that's 75 miles from the Iranian border. They have people who have flu-like symptoms. They're testing negative for flu. There's 5 known coronavirus cases in an Afghan town a mile away, and they can't get tested. They have no tests for coronavirus. Do you have any knowledge of that? Because that's something that is really worrying me.
I do not, sir, but if you give us the information, we'll go to CDC and work on that.
Yeah, we've contacted the Department of Defense, and yeah, we should get that out to CDC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Dr. Harris.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry China put us behind the 8 ball on coronavirus by delaying the announcement of the disease for a month or a month and a half and arresting physicians who actually brought it to light. But that's the way communist countries work. Commissioner, on the topic of China, I think there's a note here that you've announced that foreign inspections are not going to be conducted through April 2020. You're postponing your inspections outside the U.S. Now, I've got to ask you, because China makes a significant amount of certainly raw materials for our drugs and some of our drugs. How can we possibly trust them? How can we trust the safety of the drugs and the precursors that we're going to import from China if we're not going to do inspections? I mean, the government in China has already proven they can't be trusted. I mean, they watched for a month and a half. They watched this coronavirus epidemic start that now may become a pandemic because of their actions. How can we trust them? And going to the future, what does the FDA plan to do to make sure of the security of our drug supply from Chinese bad action?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. First of all, in the current state, FDA is confident of the safety and security of the American drug supply. We acknowledge exactly what you're saying. We have postponed our surveillance inspections in China and other high-risk areas for the protection of our employees, and we're following the State Department guidance regarding travel. That being said, for for-cause inspections outside of China, we are taking those on a case-by-case basis and only looking at the most mission-critical and essential travel. We do have a number of ways that we can look at the safety and security of the drug supply. Inspections are not the only tool that we have. We have something called the PREDICT system, which is a computerized algorithm that allows us to look at where we would assess imports and inspect those imports that are coming from countries that we believe would be at the highest risk. We've updated that system to actually include the fact that we've postponed some of these inspections, and that's allowing us to change our screening approach.
Okay, thanks. Just a very brief question about the premium cigar issue, because look, we've got to go after those devices and those tobacco products that are targeted or used by young people. But I don't think premium cigars falls into that category. You know, I have a shop right down the street, and I don't see teenagers going in for it. So does the FDA plan to provide any further modifications to the applicability of the deeming rule as it relates to premium cigars? Or will the FDA consider delaying the upcoming May compliance deadlines for premium cigars until resolution can be reached on this very small subset of really adult products?
Sir, we acknowledge the importance of this issue, as well as the comments you made regarding who uses the premium cigars. As you probably know, the premium cigar issue is part of an ongoing legal action. We will maintain the May 12th, 2020 deadline. That will be maintained. We do have a number of approaches that we can use with premium cigar makers that will make it easier for them to approach this May 12th, 2020 deadline, including the substantial equivalence pathway, and we're glad to share that information.
Sure. No, thank you very much. Just briefly on naloxone co-prescription, I think naloxone is an important tool in our toolbox against deaths from the opioid epidemic. Could you please provide an update on FDA's consideration on recommending co-prescription of naloxone?
Yes, sir. This is actually, you're right, a very important issue for FDA and for the nation. We're making efforts just in generally around naloxone for that to be available on the over-the-counter market. That's one issue. Second is we have designed, tested, and validated the key labeling requirements to facilitate that. And in April, we approved the first generic naloxone, as you know. We're working hard with government officials as well as industry for the co-developed products, sir.
But I don't understand very specifically the co-prescription, so that, and you understand, I mean,
yes,
that's
totally
one way to
understand.
get it into the hands or into those households where there is a risk because narcotics are being written into that, prescriptions are written. I mean, what is the FDA doing about co-prescription?
So we are working with industry as well as other government agencies to help in the development of that.
Okay.
Thank you so
And
much.
just finally, you know, as you know, I'm interested in making certain that when it comes to cannabis-derived products, that we make certain that they don't, I think that they should be regulated pretty broadly until we have more scientific evidence. What is the FDA doing about CBD and the very broad? I mean, I don't have my computer. I could pull up. I search for CBD. First 10 things will claim health benefits of it. What is the FDA doing?
Yes, sir. So we're taking that really seriously. As you know, we have a working group in the agency, and we just issued a report to Congress. Congress gave us money to actually do the sampling so we could have some more information. We have a knowledge gap, sir, that makes it difficult for us to know how to proceed in several areas. But what I can tell you is the following. We have taken action against companies who have made false claims about CBD products, curing cancer, treating Alzheimer's, and those are the highest risk areas. We will continue to enforce that. We are exploring the possibility of some regulatory approaches from an enforcement approach that should help us actually get to the right place and prioritize the highest risk areas.
Okay, thank you very much, and yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Lee?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this hearing. Thank you for being here. Good to meet you, Commissioner Hahn. Okay, for the last week, I have been drilling down, and my staff has been working on this. I've been doing the research, trying to figure out this whole issue of hand sanitizers. Lo and behold, I learned that it's considered a drug and subject to FDA oversight. Didn't know that. Now, manufacturers are required to notify FDA if there's a permanent discontinuance or an interruption in the manufacture of a drug. Yet I then found that it's only the life-supporting or life-sustaining drugs that they're required to report shortages of. Now, given the public health emergency we're in, of course, the first priority, washing hands for 20 seconds. But second to that is the use of hand sanitizers. I have been in 3 cities, can't find hand sanitizers anywhere at all. Many communities, rural communities, unhoused people who are living on the streets, communities of color, a lot of people don't have access to water. And this is the only kind of alternative they have, and these are the directions from our own government to use. But if it's not available, or if people can't afford it, what do we do? So I was looking at alternatives. In New York, of course, now they're using incarcerated workers to produce their own hand sanitizer. And then I said, well, what else can we do since our own government is not telling us what to do? And I have asked Dr. Redfin, Dr. Fauci, Secretary Mnuchin, Congresswoman Nora Torres asked the Ex-Im Bank director, because we heard that, of course, this sanitizer is being exported. So I decided to try to figure out what to do myself. And so online there's a recipe for making it yourself. 2/3 cup of rubbing alcohol, 1/3 cup aloe vera gel, mixing bowl, spoon, funnel, 2-ounce spray bottle of liquid soap container, masking tape or pen. So I'm saying this to you because we're telling the public that this is important to have. It's important also, even if there's access to water, using doorknobs and, you know all of the issues. And so what in the world is going on, and why are we so quiet about it? No one could answer my question. Secretary Mnuchin just said he would take it to the task force, because we were told it's the White House task force that's looking at this. But this is a big issue. It may not seem to be that big of an issue, but if people don't have access or can't wash their hands, and this is the only thing they have, and our government is telling them to use this and they can't find it, what do we do? Do we make our own?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. And I just want to acknowledge something that you said, which I think is very important. This is very important for the American people, and something that FDA takes seriously. It is regulated, as you say, under our authorities with CDER, the Center for Drug. And in that area, drug manufacturers are required to tell us if there are shortages. We are aware that there are pressures in the hand sanitizer manufacturing. And what we do is we proactively go to manufacturers, talk about their supply, try to match them up with the supply chain, and try to ask them and get them to ramp up the manufacturing. This occurs across the medical product sphere.
Okay, but just on hand sanitizers, this is not happening because it's not available.
So, Congresswoman, I can get you the most up-to-date information that we have about what we're hearing back from manufacturers, because we agree that getting as much out there as possible is important.
It's very important, but let me tell you, though, in the meantime, if the direction is to, the public health requirements are to use hand sanitizers short of being able to wash your hands, and you can't find it, what do you tell people? What do we tell our constituents? Do you believe this recipe I just laid out, it serves us well? I mean, should that be posted as an alternative until the supply is there? Or what do we tell individuals now?
So your question is a good one. I don't know that recipe, and I don't want to give the American people false information about recipes, but we will look at that.
People
Yes,
are
ma'am.
using this because
Yes,
they
ma'am.
can't find this. And then oftentimes when you try to get it online, it's $150. I mean, go and check it out yourself. Nowhere in Washington can you find it.
Yes, ma'am.
And so FDA, and I was surprised, and so that's why I'm really glad you're here today. Now that I found that it's FDA that has the oversight responsibility, and manufacturers are required to report these shortages. But somehow you've got to get the word out to people what to do in lieu of this if, in fact, this is not available.
Yes, ma'am. We are. We have a drug and devices shortage group. They are leaning in on this. They're talking to the manufacturers every day, and we've posted on our website all the shortages that we're aware of. I can get up-to-date information to you, Congresswoman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Mr. Cuellar.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and I apologize. We have Homeland, we got Defense committees, and we got Ag, of course. Dr. Hahn, again, thank you. I want to say thank you for the great work you did at the MD Anderson there at the in Texas and Houston. Appreciate all the work and what is it, about 140,000 patients that y'all look at, and people that have been suffering from cancer, and I just want to say thank you for the work that y'all do there at MD Anderson.
Thank you, sir. That was all due to the great people of the state of Texas.
Thank you so much. A couple of things. One, compounding. I understand we got to find a balance to making sure we have safety, but at the same time, if there are any folks that do have special needs, and that we set up a scientific framework that works. Because if you look at it, in the old days when we looked at pharmacy, that's the way they started off. I mean, that's originally, instead of going to the big companies, that's the work that used to be done, compounding. Tell us what you're doing to make sure that we set up a balanced approach and have a scientific framework that works, protect safety, but still address some of the special needs for patients.
Congressman, thank you for that question, and you are absolutely right. This has to be a balanced approach. We recognize that some Americans very much depend on compounding to get the vital medicines they need. On the other hand, we are aware of outbreaks that have occurred, safety issues that have occurred in the past regarding compounded drugs. So trying to get the most appropriate framework in place that has the balance there, ensure supply, but at the same time, make sure that it's safe as well is really important. I can tell you a few things that we're doing. We're trying to streamline the processes around this to make it easier for compounders. But also, as you know, we're working on a memorandum of understanding with the states to try to make it less burdensome on them. We're pushing that forward, hopefully in the next couple of months, but we've had to receive feedback from them, and that's appropriate, and other stakeholders to make sure we get to the right place and achieve this balance. We are continuing to create the 503 bulk substance list. As you know, compounds are nominated. We have to assess them and add them to the list. And thank you very much. Congress provided us additional funding for that, and we can hire some more people to actually expedite that. The sooner we expedite it, the better place we'll be with this. And then finally, we have created and are bolstering what we call the Compounding Center of Excellence, which really will help us put a lot of resources together and address this really important issue.
Well, thank you for that work. Let me bring it to the opioid crisis. Smaller communities are really being hit hard, and just want to see what we're doing to address the issue. I know all of us have been talking about coronavirus, but we still have so many people that died from opioid overuse. Can you tell us what y'all are doing to address that issue, and especially helping the small communities?
Yes, sir. You are absolutely right. It's not as if the other issues and challenges that face us go away during coronavirus, and this would be one of them. Just quickly, my perspective on this is as a cancer doctor who completely understands the need for a balance between making sure these opioids are in the hands of people who need them, but at the same time making sure that we're trying to reduce the dependence on these. And there's a couple of areas that we are working on. One, as I mentioned earlier, we're working on naloxone, both as the combination products, but also getting an over-the-counter naloxone. This is the reversal agent for opioids, which would be a really important thing. We're also working in chronic pain. So how do we develop abuse deterrent drugs? Not we, but innovators around the country to actually get them on the marketplace to help with what we know are the known factors associated with abuse. I think it's also really important. We're encouraging manufacturers and research in the area of non-opioid approaches for chronic pain, because as you know, sir, that's where we've often seen some of the problems with the epidemic is in the chronic pain situation. And this is an all-of-agency effort, and we are definitely taking this seriously. And just to express to small as well as large communities our concern for this and our ongoing effort to make sure this is a top priority for us.
Right. And I certainly understand. I mean, right now the media attention, the members of Congress, the general public is on the coronavirus, a serious situation. But at the same time, we still got other issues that we need to continue working. So to your men and women that do a good job, thank you so much, and good to see another Texan.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Mr. Cuellar. Dr. Hahn, there's been a great deal of press attention on the shortage of the N95 respirator mask in the marketplace and in the strategic national stockpile. We have a national shortage partly due to China shutting down exports of masks that are manufactured there. HHS says that we have about 1% of what we would need in a pandemic. As medical devices, N95 masks are under FDA's jurisdiction. Does FDA know what the supply of those masks is? Can you tell us the most important things that Congress can do to help you address existing and potential interruptions in the supply of medical products in the United States? The budget request includes a legislative proposal to require medical device manufacturers to notify FDA of potential supply shortages, just as drug manufacturers do. The emergency supplemental provides funding to assist FDA with supply chain interruption work, but it did not provide the requested legislative authority. Do you still believe that the legislation is needed even with the additional funds that we provided last week? And to get something through Congress fast, would it make sense to limit such legislation to products that the Secretary deems needed for the outbreak, and perhaps to sunset it after the outbreak ends while we consider long-term measures?
Thank you, sir, for that question. And yes, we still believe that our requests around legislative authority on devices where masks would be in part of are necessary so that we have a more accurate picture of the supply chain. You bring up a very good point, sir, and this is true for other devices as well as the N95 masks. So just a little background, the N95 masks, there are two different types. One are FDA authorized for the medical situation, and the other are for industrial, authorized by NIOSH. There is one important difference between the two, and that is high volume or high pressure spray of liquids, such as in the operating room if you're a surgeon and blood's coming your way. So that's the major difference. What we did to try to increase the supply of these masks is issue some regulatory flexibility. That was Monday a week ago, to let medical providers know that they should follow the CDC revised guidance about this. You can use either one of those two types of masks, and there's a lot more of those other masks available than the surgical ones that I mentioned. You can use those other masks in the non-surgical setting. It's all according to the CDC guidance. And we believe that flexibility should help. I also understand that there are some liability issues around this that manufacturers have mentioned, and that is a separate subject than what FDA does. I can tell you, sir, that we are in constant touch with manufacturers over the respirator N95 issue. We know that there are spot shortages. We know that there are a shortening of the supply chain associated with this, and there's demand. We're staying on top of it. If any shortages are identified by FDA, we will let the American public know.
Let me switch gears for a moment. The safety of our food supply is very important, and we've undoubtedly made improvements in our food safety systems. Our recent recalls, of course, are reminders that we still have work to do. Key indicators of FDA's performance are down significantly between 2018 and 2019. Notably, domestic inspections down 18%, import visual exams down 25%, and import samples down 21%. Congress has funded over 2,700 human food FTEs for the Office of Regulatory Affairs to address this. Unfortunately, at the end of calendar year 2019, the Office of Regulatory Affairs has only allocated 785 positions for the compliance and inspection staff, not to include import and lab staff, who work on food safety. What accounts for the declines in inspections in recent years in domestic inspection, in domestic inspections, import exams, and import analysis? And what accounts for their not filling positions in human food inspection and compliance activities?
Sir, I'll address the filling positions issue first, because that is a critical need at the agency. We spent a lot of time since my arrival at the end of December looking at the issue of human resources and hiring qualified people to do these inspections. We've made a substantial amount of progress in the last 2 months, but we have a lot more progress to do to get the appropriate people here. And so we are doing everything we can to ramp up the number of inspectors. The volume of food that comes into this country, both from an import point of view but also domestically produced, is substantial. We have a couple of different ways that we're approaching this in addition to inspections. And one of the things that we asked for is additional funding for an artificial intelligence-based approach to this so that we can keep up with the demand around inspections. What this will do is allow us to better target where we need to do the inspections and where it's best for us to look so that we have more information. We've done a pilot around this, and we've actually determined that we think this can substantially increase our ability to do that.
We've funded 2,700 FTEs, but you're only utilizing 785 positions.
We are, sir, we are working very hard to fill those positions. We have cleared a lot of obstacles just recently on that. The other point I want to make is that we do depend upon and are work very closely with our state partners to do these inspections as well.
Okay, we'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Mr. Adderholt?
Thank you. Oh, Dr. Horn, I'm aware that there are therapeutic antibodies that can be used to treat some viruses. Is the use of these therapeutic antibodies something that could be treat COVID-19?
Sir, we have been approached by innovators, by developers around this. So there's a class of drugs called antiretrovirals, drugs that would treat a specific virus, and in this case, coronavirus. There are monoclonal antibodies, as you described, that would be another step in the treatment. We are aware of innovators, and I can't give you specific details about that because of confidential commercial information, who are also looking in that space. And we've been approached by many, and I mean many, groups, innovators, manufacturers around all of these particular therapeutics. And then, of course, we have the vaccines, which is a much longer-term thing. Across that entire spectrum of treatment, the antiretrovirals, the monoclonal antibodies, and the vaccine, we are accelerating our work with the manufacturers to get as much regulatory clarity, but also to help them with the development process and to get them into patients as quickly as possible. Obviously, some of these are new and unproven therapies. They're going to have to go through clinical testing in order to get them into patients on a routine basis.
Is there anything that can be done to help sort of a rapid grant emergency use approval to ramp up this manufacturing?
We would love to work with Congress on this. Right now, we have the appropriate tools and people to actually interact, but would love to share ideas with you, sir, about what more could be done to accelerate this. This is, as you can imagine, with the group behind me, a top priority in terms of trying to accelerate the development of these therapeutics.
And we've heard that media reports that blood banks across the country are experiencing shortages. To our knowledge, individuals cannot get affected with COVID-19 through a blood transfusion, is my understanding. Can you tell us if you've heard from blood banks and if they're experiencing any shortages?
Congressman, thank you very much for asking that question. First of all, you're absolutely right. We have no evidence that COVID-19 is transmitted through blood and the blood supply. No evidence of that. Secondly, we are aware, and it's happened within the last several days, that there are some concerns about people not donating blood because of the restrictions that we might have on group gatherings, et cetera. Consistent with local health authority recommendations, we encourage Americans to continue to donate blood because this is a vital issue for many Americans around the country. So let me just state that again. Consistent with local health recommendations about what sort of settings folks should go to, we encourage Americans to continue to donate blood and blood products.
Okay. And of course, I know your background is not infectious diseases, but rather oncology. But could you tell us, give us a comparison from what your understanding is from as a medical doctor and in the research you've done, what the casualty rate for just the regular virus is, as opposed to COVID-19, for especially, say, over 65, 70 years of age?
So the White House COVID-19 task force is working on this. Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci are definitely leaning in on this and are doing the modeling associated with this. I can tell you in broad scale because, as you point out, I'm definitely not an infectious disease doctor. It's the following. This appears to be a particularly problematic and lethal virus for elderly and those with underlying immunodeficiency states, those who are getting chemotherapy, those with other coexisting medical problems, in some cases severe diabetes, dialysis, et cetera. So the mortality rate seems to be higher in those patients. Interestingly enough, and a welcome bit of information is younger folks often don't even know they have it, even though they've got infected. Now, the interesting thing about that is that's both a good thing because we don't want them to be sick, but also a negative because people don't know that they've been infected. With respect to the mortality, there is a range here. You probably know that there's a range of number of people who die of flu every year, and that can be 10, 20,000 according to CDC statistics, all the way up to 65 to 70,000. I don't yet have, and I believe Dr. Birx and Fauci are working on this, the estimates for the exact mortality rate associated with COVID-19. We believe that it's going to be relatively close or perhaps even higher than a bad flu outbreak. But again, I would recommend, sir, that we wait for Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx to finish their modeling and let the American people know.
Do you know what, for the regular flu, what, for those that are, say, over age 70, what the regular flu, the casualty rate is at?
So we know that from the CDC data that those numbers can vary between 0.1 and 0.4. We also know that it can be significant in the elderly. I can take that question to Dr. Redfield and get an accurate answer for you, sir.
Yeah, and I'd like to know what compared to, say, what with a diagnosis of with the coronavirus, how that compares to that age group. You know, if it's, you say 0.4, 0.8, whatever percentage it is for a regular virus, the normal virus that is very common, as opposed to what the coronavirus would be and how those two numbers compare.
Yes, sir. I will ask Dr. Redfield, Fauci, and Birx to get those data, and as soon as they're available from them, we'll make sure that you all have that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Wingreen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to take an entirely different tack here, so a brief moment of not talking about the coronavirus. One of my colleagues brought up CBD, and I know I saw the pained look on your face when that came up. I do appreciate that you submitted the report to Congress last week. It's an issue that's been of great concern to my constituents, to the hemp growers around the country. It's, as you know, complicated and it's been challenging. I think many of us were disappointed that the report didn't provide more clarity and concrete steps forward. I know you're focused on safety, and you reiterated it in your testimony today about the companies that are marketing products and the many ways that human and animal health may be put and safety may be put at risk. But you haven't taken any robust action to issue regulatory guidance that would clear the market. I know you've written some letters, but it doesn't seem like that's enough. And aren't you concerned that having no guidance and no total inaction is actually worse for public health and safety than if you did do something? I mean, right now it's just out there and there are false claims and people are unsure what to do. So how do you see this timeline moving forward?
Congresswoman, thank you for the question, and I did appreciate our conversation about this. And as we discussed, and as I mentioned previously, there has to be a balanced and pragmatic approach here. These products are out there, and we have to acknowledge that. The American people are telling us that they want to use these products because they think they're beneficial. We want to make sure that we have the data to inform those decisions. I'm thinking particularly in the dietary supplement side of the world. So we're exploring this enforcement guidance, just as you state, to provide some clarity. Clarity to the American people, clarity to the industry. It's taken us a bit of time within the agency to get to this point. I'm pretty comfortable that we are going to work forward in the next few months to actually get this. We're working through the process within the department and the White House to get to that point, and it will be a balanced approach, acknowledging the fact that you can't make claims about cancer, Alzheimer's, et cetera, really can't target vulnerable populations, pregnant, lactating women, teething rings for babies, and other vulnerable populations, but that we know there's agents out there that people believe could be helpful, and we need to gather data and do research. And so a major part of our effort is to actually do that and kind of figure out what we can tell the American people. And then what do we do moving forward? Is it more on the enforcement prioritization? Is it rulemaking? We don't want to rush to that judgment until we have the data to make the right decision, but acknowledging 100% what you're saying, which is more clarity is needed regarding this from this agency.
And just to be clear, I have a tremendous number of constituents who see an enormous amount of value in the product and, as you said, are already using it for a whole variety of reasons. I have people who are producing the product, and I think one of the challenges is to the legitimate growers, legitimate manufacturers right now, sort of knowing that there's just such a plethora of stuff out there and claims out there. It makes it hard for the serious producers to really move forward. We put the FY2021 budget requests $5 million, and how do you see that being helpful to accelerate your process? Is that enough money? Where are we with supporting this effort?
Thank you very much for that, because one of the things, the critical need here, besides getting the enforcement policy forward and providing regulatory clarity, is conducting the research and gathering the data. We've opened a portal to collect data. We would very much value working with legitimate manufacturers to see how we could gather those data about safety and efficacy. We are so interested in bringing that forward, putting that together, and helping us inform the right way to move forward. We're interested in learning about manufacturing, what are the best manufacturing principles, making sure that the content is what it is and what it's said to be. All those things need to be addressed moving forward. So we're going to use the funds both from an informatics point of view, but also to do the research and data collection.
I understand that the UK Food Safety Agency recently provided some advice on the upper limits. Do you communicate with other countries and how they're looking at this, EU counterparts? Do you imagine that there would be an upper limit guidance?
It's a really good question. We have looked at this internally, and I think the context here is really important. As you know, CBD, and yes, we've talked to other regulators. I can answer that up front. I'm sorry for, but as you probably know, CBD has gone through as an active pharmaceutical ingredient through the pharmaceutical or through our drug pathway, and is a part of an approved drug for the treatment of 2 very serious pediatric seizure disorders. Right. What we've learned from that is that we do have to be careful on the safety side. Those drugs are terrific for these indications, but it has given us some insight into this. It would be very difficult and not a lot of science and data behind being able to establish that upper limit at this point. And we don't want to put something out that unnecessarily either restricts, but also perhaps makes a mistake on the safety side as well. I don't see that happening right now until we gather additional information.
Great. Well, I yield back, and thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. Dr. Hahn, 2017 HHS Inspector General report on FDA's domestic food safety inspections included a number of troubling findings, such as, 1, the FDA wasted its inspectors' time going to facilities were out of business or not operating. 2, even when inspectors found very serious violations, FDA did not always take action to remedy the problem, often relying on voluntary actions by the facility. And 3, that the FDA consistently failed to conduct timely follow-up inspections. In half of the cases, FDA took no action within a year, and in 17% of the cases, it never did a follow-up inspection. What corrective steps has FDA taken to address these Inspector General findings?
Sir, thank you for that question. We take very seriously the Inspector General's findings around this. We discussed earlier that we are hiring inspectors. We're increasing the training of inspectors. We're using other techniques, artificial intelligence, et cetera, to actually buff up the approach that we're taking and have a more targeted approach to this where there's the highest risk associated with the products. But again, sir, I want to acknowledge the fact that we totally hear you about those, and we are working internally to address all of those and increasing our capacity to do the appropriate inspections.
Thank you. The dietary supplement industry has ballooned since passage of the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act in 1994. This is a $60 billion market, but we don't actually know how many products are out there. Because manufacturers are not required to notify FDA of the products that they make. Your budget asks Congress for the authority to require the disclosure of this information. This is known as product listing. Can you tell us more about why this proposal is needed and what the benefits will ultimately be?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you because you've totally laid out the issue here for the agency. You're right, this is a pretty big industry, and we have limited authorities and resources, really haven't kept up with the quickly expanding marketplace that we see. And, you know, the American public depends upon us to help reassure them about the safety of some of these products. It's becoming increasingly complicated, and our program is actually quite small compared to that market. So the additional $3 million in resources that this subcommittee previously provided in 2020 will have an impact, both around the guidance we can provide industry, but also around the ability to surveil the industry and take action when necessary. On the authority side, we are seeking those new authorities in the FY2021 budget to require, as you state, all supplements to be listed with FDA, because that's the start, sir, is understanding what's out there, and then assessing what claims are being made, and that will help us in prioritizing our enforcement actions. We think this will give us a better understanding of the landscape and is the beginning of a journey regarding this to help the American people make the absolute best decisions they can.
Thank you. Mr. Adderhope.
Thank you. And as we wrap up here, we just got notice that the World Health Organization has declared the coronavirus pandemic. So that I understand from the reports that the organization had previously resisted from that classification, but is now going forward with that. Just your thoughts on that.
Yes, sir. This is typically, as you point out, a World Health Organization designation. They have, and I'm not privy to what the World Health Organization's thinking is, but they have not been willing to call this a pandemic. Their assessment now, as you point out, and thank you for that information, is that this fulfills the criteria of a pandemic, which is basically widespread global cases of the coronavirus outbreak. So that doesn't change what we need to do in this country. We still need to take the appropriate precautions that CDC is asking us to do. Wash hands. If you're a vulnerable population, take the appropriate steps. We recently, from the Coronavirus Task Force, have a terrific guidance document. It's a 2-pager that says, how do you keep your home safe? How do you keep the workplace safe? How to keep schools safe? It's got very practical advice around this. These are the things that the American people need to be doing now, and it's very important guidance. Washing hands, social distancing, all of those things. So the fact that the World Health Organization has declared this a pandemic, as you described, is important information. It doesn't change what we need to do internally to protect the country. And I think we need to address other issues from a travel perspective, and that's what the Coronavirus Task Force is doing.
Let me ask you this: if you're, you know, to keep it from being a, you know, people going hysteria about, and especially with classification as a pandemic, you know, what the average person out there, I assume that if they get a sore throat or if they get a cough or a low-grade fever, it doesn't automatically mean they have the coronavirus. How do you tell, you know, the general public, you know, and anybody that gets, you know, a sore throat or something, you know, to go in hibernation for 2 weeks, or is it truly just a sore throat? Is there anything, distinguishing thing that we could be helpful? Because we're going to run into a lot of constituents that are going to have this question, and, you know, family members, whatever. So your advice and comments on that.
Congressman, this is an excellent question and really important for the American people. And there's a lot of guidance in CDC and coronavirus.gov around this. We can help make that available to your constituents. I'm going to go doctor here on you, sir, and that is if you're a patient who is, or a person who is concerned that they might have coronavirus, we recommend that you contact your provider. If you don't have a provider, there are local public health services that you can contact regarding this. You notice I'm not saying go in and to see the provider. Let the provider provide guidance about this. And it all depends on your situation. I'll give you a couple examples. If you're a 20-year-old with a sore throat, that's a different situation than if you're someone who's getting cancer chemotherapy and you're 60. And the recommendations from your provider will be different, both about what you should do immediately to treat yourself and what you should do from a testing perspective. So we really very much depend upon our provider base and the state public health officials to provide guidance to patients about this. A couple things, though, that are general. One is if you are sick, you shouldn't go to work. You should stay home and recover. No matter where you are, you should really, at all times, wash your hands. If you're around, if you're well, you're a younger person, for example, and you're around someone who's a vulnerable person, and this is in the CDC guidance, you should basically act like you might be a carrier of coronavirus to protect that person. We know that the people most at risk and the most vulnerable are the elderly and those with significant underlying conditions such as cancer treatment, such as severe diabetes, such as some people with cardiovascular diseases, et cetera. They're all listed on the CDC website, and that is the absolute best guidance we can give the American people. Younger people are at lower risk, maybe not even knowing they have it, and that's why this guidance around, if you're around someone who's vulnerable, just be careful. You should act as if you have it and protect them.
Okay. Just in concluding, I want to just end by, as we had talked earlier about the treatment of foreign drug inspections. And I know that there's an argument to be made out there by FDA that talks about that there's other ways that you can inspect drug facilities. I think you alluded to it today. And there's other tools that can be used. But considering FDA's treatment of foreign drug inspections, granting what the Office of the Inspector General says is that there's up to 12 weeks notice. Does FDA treat domestic drug or medical device manufacturers differently?
Excellent question, Congressman. Thank you so much. So we have the same rigorous standards for foreign as well as domestic manufacturers. Now, there are complications. Some countries where we don't have in-country people, we're required to get visas before we go in. But I want to be clear about something. FDA has conducted foreign inspections that are unannounced. We have done that and will continue to do so when appropriate. And unannounced inspections only are done for an for-cause basis. So when a reason is identified, such as a report of an injury or an illness related to a product, we can and have done a for-cause unannounced inspection. And, you know, pending the travel restrictions that we have now, right now, we will continue to do that. The other point I want to make is that this is a postponement of inspections. This is not a cancellation of inspections. So even the routine surveillance inspections, we're planning to go back, and to the best of our ability, depending on how long the travel restrictions are in place, we're planning to go back and do those surveillance inspections.
But is it generally that a lot of overseas companies get 12 weeks notice, up to 12 weeks notice at times?
They can at times, but I can tell you specifically to your question, we have done unannounced visits in both China and India.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Hahn, thank you for being here today. We appreciate you taking time out to share your knowledge. I'm sure that the American public is sitting on the edge of their seat listening, and we wish you success in leading the FDA. We look forward to continued work with you and to your efforts at the FDA. We'll be sending some additional questions for the record, and we ask that you get your responses back to us by the deadline set by the subcommittee. Again, we'd like to thank you, and with that, the subcommittee is adjourned.
Thank you, sir.